Coming to you from top secret field offices worldwide, these brave men and women fight a battle for truth, justice, and good clean data. These agents of change make up the Bureau of Records, Objects, and Standards. They are the Data Bros.
Welcome to Data Bros, a comic industry podcast about comic book data, the comic industry, and running a retail store. I'm your host this week, Brian Garside, and with me, as always, are my friends Jeff Figley.
Hey.
And Django Boren.
Hey.
Look at that. We didn't even stump all over each other.
Yeah.
Hey, fellas, this week I thought we would have a little bit of fun and talk about something. We try and make these guys evergreen, so we don't tend to talk about current events. But just last week, there was a huge announcement at South by Southwest, which we'll talk about the appropriateness of that or not. But they basically announced the X-Men teams, the new X-Men teams. And Jeff, I think you've done a little research and you could tell us who those X-Men teams are.
Yeah, and this is a great week to be talking about this because actually on the day of recording, it is the release of X-Men 97, the animated series on Disney Plus.
Nice.
Which really ties into the idea of nostalgia-based properties and trying to be relived or reignited. The three books are X-Men, written by Jed MacKay with art by Ryan Stegman, Uncanny X-Men with art by Dave Marquez, written by Gail Simone, and the third book is Exceptional X-Men, written by Eve Ewing, art by Carmen Carnero. Eve Ewing has done Ironheart, Photon, and Champions, and Carmen Carnero had done Captain Marvel, Detective Comics, and Captain America. Both of those creators, I knew the names, but didn't know their body of work super well.
Cool. So let's talk about, first of all, the announcement. So this was announced last weekend at South by Southwest, which it's interesting because Marvel's done a few South by Southwest announcements. I think they even dropped like the original version of their Marvel Unlimited app at South by Southwest back in the day. So they've kind of got, because South by Southwest is a music, it's like a music conference kind of thing, but it's also used to be, and I think it still is, kind of a major tech thing. So there's always been a lot of tech stuff going on at that. And I think I was about to go to one a few years ago and I didn't end up going to it because they usually do like interesting, Ruby on Rails stuff and things like that there. So
I think they've also had like flat stock conventions there as well.
Yeah.
Like poster printing, which is usually kind of music related, but not exclusively.
Well, yeah, like didn't Mondo start in Austin?
Yeah, I think so.
I think they did, right? Yeah. So and that's where like Ain't Cool News was headquartered out of, and they had the Button-Umathon stuff, and
it looked like
a great podcast about all that stuff.
Marvel has been appearing there since 2012.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So yeah, they've got a history of this. But Django, did you get the data update like last week that had all these new X-Men titles in them so that people could order them right away?
No.
You might want to check your database real quick.
No, I don't need to check our database.
I'll pop into Geek Fetch real quick and see. Oh no,
not available to Comic Shop Assistant
right now. No. So right now, no customers that are learning about this can subscribe to those things.
But wait. No. I saw the Google News. I saw it on my internet feed that those were announced. So I should definitely be able to tell my shop I want them.
You can, and they will either tell you to come back in a month or take a sticky note and put it on their monitor, and hopefully it doesn't fall off.
So have you guys at the shop heard, like, have you had a lot of requests for any of this stuff?
That's a good question. I would say when there are big announcements like this for books that are quite a ways out from initial order or FOC, we always get one or two people mentioning them, and I'm not sure if it is just our customer base being trained a certain way, but it isn't to the extent that I hear other people deal with it. We also do quite a bit of taking care of people's subs and whatnot, auto subbing and whatnot, to kind of decrease maybe a perceived necessity of that, but that doesn't mean that it isn't irritating every time.
Right. You know, I realize that this is all going to merge into one giant, what's that word you like to use?
Homunculus.
Homunculus. I didn't even tease industry yammer. I'm not going to go into data verification. We will tease shop talk in a bit. But
They'll
the
shuffle
data,
together.
the data broification of this really is me putting on my marketing hat. Have you guys seen my fancy marketing? Look, it's
Oh my
Oh,
God. I
right.
love the
Isn't it
reflective
gorgeous?
nature of it.
The
Yeah,
feather. The
that's the
feather
mark.
is
Yeah.
so good.
Is that a
The feather
quail
has a
egg?
story. And we don't talk about the quail egg.
Okay.
What is?
We'll
How does
talk
it
about-
smell? Because that hat looks like it smells
Musky.
like nothing else in your house.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. So wearing my marketing hat, there's kind of two types of marketing that you do. There's earned media and there's paid media. And earned media is like PR and news announcements and that stuff. It's free and it's probably the most valuable media. The other media is paid where you're paying for ads. I think earned media is like the gold standard of media. And if you can get earned media,
Mhm.
like it's worth its weight in gold. Part of earned media, part of any marketing is that there should be a call to action, and that call to action should have an outcome. And that outcome might be people could order your thing.
Yeah.
So having that data for all you publishers who are listening out here, Philip, if you're listening, here's the little marketing tip for you. Us having that data earlier will allow our stores to subscribe to that thing and will make a huge difference. So if we look at the opposite end of the spectrum, when DC announced or leaked or whatever happened with the Marvel versus DC omnibus buy
Mhm.
that were released recently, Lunar sent out a special data update. So it was actually the April update that they sent out like 3 weeks early. And it had all of the stuff for those 4 books. There was 2 covers for each of them. I think there was an amalgam one and then a regular DC Marvel crossover omnibus.
Mhm.
And we instantly saw people signing up for that stuff. So that's kind of the good end of that story. The bad end of the X-Men story is we probably won't see that data until this Friday. And that announcement happened, was it last weekend or 2
It's like a
weekends
week ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky because it puts stores in a position where we can't sell a thing that people are asking for necessarily. I mean, we can, it just makes it a lot more confusing and introduces a lot more places for the whole system to break down on our end. And the person that looks like a fool at that point is the store for
Yeah.
not having the infrastructure to handle it. But it's kind of, I mean, I guess it's our fault as a store, but really, if we were being supported with the data for that, it would streamline things a lot. And I think part of what you're describing is a problem with the comic book flow of data, where we basically get updates once a month or once a week, and getting constant updates is not in the infrastructure for most systems in comic books right now, which is unfortunate because South by Southwest, yeah, why not announce a big thing right there?
Well, the good thing is in Comet, we actually account for this, and we have different kind of phases of when the data should come in. What was interesting, Brian Hibbs commented on somebody's post about Comet recently,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody had kind of said, like, I don't understand this. This doesn't really make sense. There seems like there's too much data being requested. And he said, there's nothing really in Comet that doesn't already exist in one way or another. The difference is they've identified everything and they've said, we want to get the right data at the right time in the right order.
Place. Yeah.
And it was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what we're trying to do.
And like bringing it back to your, statements about the 2 different types of, kind of advertisement earned. And I'm trying to think of like the byproducts of that. Obviously you want that earned excitement. And like, what is the goal? You were describing sort of a call to action at the end. And I would say also that a goal is generating excitement. Whether a call to action is available to be made at that point or not. So to bring it back to sort of our this week discussion, a good example of this is this week, today, X-Men 97 was released. That is something that is pretty exciting to me, and I think my generation, because that was what got me into X-Men. This animated series was announced November 2021.
Right.
That is a long time ago. And so this idea of generating excitement, and so it's a wonderful thing, but if you generate that excitement too early, then by the time the thing is available or the data is available to be subscribed or something, it's become old news at that point to a certain extent. So it's a fine line. I think distributors, publishers, everything needs to walk, right? You need to advertise and get that excitement. And ideally there's going to be a call to action, but I think looking at it top down, there's got to be some ideal timeframes, kind of like you're describing with Comet, and providing those timeframes. But just advertising at South by Southwest and then people not being able to order it for, in bad situations, a month or something, or in this X-Men situation, not being able to watch it for 2.5 years. Like if they had just waited to announce it a year and a half after that, I think you'd have more people excited about this thing right now, because now it's had this, it's the advertisement cycle has had its own life cycle of like interest, excitement peaking, dying down. And now we're like, oh, right. Yeah, I was interested in that. I sat down to watch the 2 episodes that came out today right before this, since we're going to be talking about X-Books. So
I wonder how much of that is trying to head off a scoop or a leak. So like if somebody walked by Gail Simone's table at a convention and saw that there was a script for the Uncanny X-Men and reported that to Bleeding Cool, then the rumor mill starts and Marvel has kind of lost control of
That's a good
the
point.
narrative there.
But this is something I used to work in journalism. Django used to work in journalism. Yeah. If it bleeds, it leads, baby.
That's right.
But what always kind of boggled my mind was how the wrong people paid attention to rumor and innuendo, and in the wrong time. It's like there are rumors like that you could just let go. Just let that.
As soon as you get defensive,
percolate.
You've validated it.
Yeah, because there's another rumor going around right now that Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo are doing Wolverine. But I think they should just let that percolate. Don't do anything about that. If that's a book that's going to be launched in June or July, wait until the July catalogs are ready to be released before you announce that. The other thing is, on the week when when initial orders are all due, they start pumping out the previews of the next catalog, which don't even get released for a full other week. So you start seeing all this media about, like on Bleeding Cool, you'll see
piecing together solicitations.
Why are you doing that? Like, wait until, and Bleeding Cool is grabbing a bunch of it from Entertainment Weekly and a bunch of it from, I don't know, Newsweek, and a bunch of it from Time Magazine, and then putting them together. The fact of the matter is, you have that crap out there right now, and if you wait 1 week, Bleeding Cool can't release that story.
There was a creator at Emerald City who had on display the first few pages of a book that he's got coming out soon.
Sure.
And it was way before it's been solicited. He doesn't have a barcode for it. He doesn't have diamond codes for it. He's got like nothing useful to stores other than this thing that he's excited to promote. And after Emerald City, he got a hold of me and he's like, hey, what's the best way for me to make sure that stores can subscribe or special order this for customers if I don't have a diamond code? And I was like, well, do you have a barcode? He said, no. It's like, we need something to match on when the actual data comes in. And I was like, I can't think of a smooth way for you to do that without having some identifier for that book.
Yeah, we could start creating like exceptions where we would create these 3 titles with no other information, and then hopefully we can tie them together. But Django, you and I made a mistake with one publisher. I don't know if we should say who it was.
It was a team effort mistake between 3 different people.
We thought we were doing something really, really cool, and it ended up really biting us in the butt because the barcode was slightly off and it caused duplication in the system. and a number of headaches.
And just because, like, if Manage Comics and Comic Shop Assistant can both code our way around this and have ways for people to subscribe to these books that don't have full data, that's a tiny sliver of the industry, and that's barely solving the problem for a handful of stores.
5%
relatively,
maybe.
Yeah.
And
I
think Django, you touched on something as well, which kind of looking at this and the timeframes and whatnot, comics are a thing that require a lead time to create and produce and distribute. And I think that what we run into a lot of time is general excitement from the people working on things, not being super tight-lipped about it. And I think that's an entirely forgivable human thing. But at some point, it does let information get out there a little bit quicker. And I think, again, syncing up that announcement time with the time at which there's a point of call to action or something is really, really important. Brian.
That's true. Let me give you a perfect scenario where this worked absolutely flawlessly, and like kudos to the Boom Studios crew. At Comics Pro, they had the man's best crew there. I was like leafing through the ash can that they had, and I don't even think I'd heard of this book before. Actually, that's not true, because I think I had just on the plane listened to Off Panel where David Harper had talked about it, and did an interview with the creators. Anyway, I'm looking at the ash can and I'm like, oh my god, this is like right my jam. This it feels very We3 kind of, which is one of my all-time favorite books. And right there, I pulled up my phone and I went to my LCS and I used Managed Comics to request subscriptions for that. Like right in, because the thing was there, it was top of mind. If I would have waited till I got back to my room, no chance I would have subscribed to it. And now it's sitting there at my comic store waiting for me to pick it up, and I gotta go.
And another instance of it being done perfectly, and then we'll move on to the next part of our discussion, because again, Comics Bros, tight 30.
Tight 30.
But an instance of a company doing it perfectly in my mind would have been the Comics Pro, where Philip, shout out Philip, announced Once in Future. And they announced Once in Future, and in that presentation they said it is available to be ordered from Diamond right now. And his call to action in that presentation was to match your Batman numbers or whatever, which Django and I did. But it was an instance of an announcement tied to the availability, which there was, an actionable thing. And then, Brian, the longer that we've gone into this, that call to action, I think I more and more agree with you that generating excitement alone isn't a viable outcome. There, a call to action or something does really need to be done.
The big difference between those, sorry, not to drag this on. The big difference between that presentation and the X-Men presentation is that the X-Men presentation is for fans,
consumers,
and those two that you guys were just talking about were for retailers.
Yep, great point.
So if they tried to push that on us in that moment without that data available, they would get face-to-face pushback. So like,
which is why
nice to have it for everything, guys.
And as we move into industry yammer, the broification and shop talk, Brian, I'm having a hard time actually getting your eye contact because of the marketing hat. It must be the dangling beads.
Let me pull that on.
You got an Orville pet going on.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I'm surprised you couldn't hear it, because there's an entire bell structure at the back.
We'll put it
in
post. We'll put it.
Did you have to put the hat rack on did you have to attach that to a stud?
Thing looks heavy. That sucker's in. It's actually, I've got in my basement here, I've got like a beam, an I-beam, and so it's
the only way.
It's attached right there.
Hey, some important messages coming up. Stick around.
It's Bob. Hit my music. I've had it up to here with all this packaging mumbo jumbo. Murphy's is juice. We ain't cider, and we sure in tarnation are not some composted fruit peel what's-it packaging corp. As of 4:15 p.m. today, I have fired the board of directors and sent those freeloaders packing. We are back to business. It's prime juice harvesting time, and this juice ain't gonna get in these bottles itself. Murphy's, it's the shape, not the taste. But it's also the taste, which is pretty dang good.
All right, now, back to the show.
Brian, I went off on a note tangent. I've got so many notes about how I want to approach this X-Men thing. Also, the history of X-Men, why certain things have worked or didn't work. Your notes here had some wonderful prompts for conversation, so I'm
That
very
sounds
excited.
suspiciously like some shop talk. Are we talking shop talk?
Shop talk?
We should listen to that. Oh, I didn't see. I've always thought it was like a music box thing, but I kind of
Like a Seinfeld slappy thing, because I could do that.
Slappy,
Maybe
slappy
even-
Seinfeld. I mean, that's what I think of every time I walk in our store is a Seinfeld transition.
maybe a little more.
That's why you pause for applause for like 4 seconds every time. You get
Yeah.
that Kramer thing going.
Django, do you pause in the doorway and
In the doorway, get a little bit bigger, wait for the
Yeah, there
applause,
you
and
go.
then continue the scene.
Good times, fast times, really.
So Jeff, how are you going to handle this X-Men relaunch, and how are you going to like auto sub customers and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I'm going to mention that you included in your notes here is that Brian, you said you'd love to include an anecdotal story about when you fell off the Krakoa stuff and how much you as an X or a lapsed X fan won't likely come back to this new relaunch because it's already too much. Or cut that if you want to address that entirely yourself.
Do you want to talk about it?
Well, it's all lumped in my mind together because the way that I'm going to approach those auto subs is bearing in mind that not only you, but many people are in that same boat. And, you know, we got, and I'll not even just speak for myself as my own opinion, but I think Hoxpox, House of X, Powers of 10, the Hickman relaunch of X-Men that happened a little bit before the pandemic, was one of the most exciting things that happened in comics. And we could not, and many other stores could not order enough copies of that comic. Each subsequent issue, it was selling out. It was a huge, huge deal. So I was thinking about why did that work? What happened between now and then to put our readers in the spot that they are and our retailers in the spot that they are? And then how is this different or the same from that? And how do I want to approach it? In a nutshell, though, my auto subs for those 3 series are going to be done similar to how I oftentimes do them. With the X-Men book specifically, I look at the creative team and the characters within the book. And if you have been like an Al Ewing fan lately, and he's doing a new book, I would use X-Men Red as the auto sub basis to move subscribers over to a new thing. This one, obviously, it's a whole relaunch. So the only thing I really have is a sense of continuity between now and this relaunch are going to be the characters in the books. Sure. And they've made a great effort to sort of show us which characters are in which books. Stegman has done a good job of leaking out some pages, penciled and otherwise, showing the art and interiors from the book. Again, between now and the point of ordering, a big question for me is going to be sussing out whether X-Men by Jed MacKay or Uncanny X-Men by Gail Simone seems to be the main anchor book.
Sure.
Exceptional X-Men seems to be a classic Marvel sort of tertiary title thrown in there to show that this relaunch extends to more people than you think or whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'll be looking at that. I'll be looking at the creative teams again, like Eve Ewing, Ironheart, Photon, Champions. So do I have subscribers who got more than one of those books that has also expressed interest in X books in the past? They would get an auto sub for it. Comic Shop Assistant, Django and I's POS system has a bunch of those tools within it to be able to be doing that auto sub stuff. Our old POS system, Moby, had some, not as robust as well. But yeah, that's going to factor into it largely. I will probably auto sub people to the series rather than a single item. I think House of X and Powers of 10 had a leg up on this relaunch because it was a unified story of 12 issues between those 2 series that took weekly for 12 issues, so 3 months to put out there. And if somebody made it to the end of that, then they had the platter of things that they could sign up for. When that Hoxpox series of 6 books was announced, Django and I had made up a document that had the creative teams and images of all the covers announced, and we put it in everyone's file so that they could check boxes for which ones they were interested in and not, which was a very helpful thing. I think we sent it out to other shops as well. So I will be relying a little bit on my customers, but I'll be, flying by the seat of my pants for relaunches. But X-Men is something that has had a ton of relaunches, and I would say Hoxpox was the anomaly in that. And so I will not be basing my orders sort of on what that did. that is to me like the ceiling of a relaunch's possibility, and I don't see that happening often.
I think, like, not to be a total counterpoint, but I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there are also people who are going to be jumping on at this point as well. Like, I'm more interested in reading all three of these than I am in reading any single X-Men book that's coming out right now, partly
Yeah.
because I don't have the X-Men deep in my bones, and I'm always curious about X-Men beginning, and I
Yeah.
fall off when they just shoot out too many ongoing series.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that's interesting. So I'll give you my brief history of X-Men lore. I bought Uncanny X-Men 164 off the shelf, and that was my first X-Men, and I didn't miss an issue until X-Men ended. Uncanny X-Men ended. So I was pretty all in. And then when it ended, I was just like, you know what? Like I hadn't enjoyed it for probably 10 years, but I was just buying it because that's what you do,
What you
right?
do?
Yeah. And so I got out of it. And House of X Powers of 10 is what got me back into X-Men. So, and that was a big gap, like probably 15 years. I was still avidly collecting comics, just not X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. And then the first couple titles came out and I really enjoyed them all the way up to Marauders, which I really liked Marauders. And then just like it got overwhelming so
Yep.
quickly. It went
Yep.
from 3 or 4 titles to like I don't know. They're probably at 15, 20 now.
Started at 6. Like that
Yeah.
is a lot of books, and
Mm-hmm.
especially when your consumer base wants to know what is the main thread.
Yeah.
So where we're at right now with X-Men reminds me much more of where we were at in the relaunch that happened when Matt Rosenberg took over writing it, which was the incarnation right before the Hickman one. And I think because of House of X and Powers of 10, this relaunch is getting a lot more news around the potential for it. But in my mind, there has been frequent X-Men relaunches in the last 15 years,
Mhm.
and they all follow a relatively similar trajectory, with Hoxpox as the exception for that. Django, to your point, yeah, I'm gonna do my auto subs, but on a Marvel series, I trust ordering shelf quantities
Mm-hmm.
much more than I do for like a DC book
Yeah.
property. Marvel, yeah. So, and especially with 3 books, there, I mean, I'm not going to commit people to them as readily as I would a DC book, especially because with Marvel, they can oftentimes have such different voices. But like, it's a really interesting question. Like, what is, when a thing like this is happening, I have to ask my self questions, like as a retailer, and I would think many retailers do, of just like, okay, so is this offering something new? How is this different, this relaunch, than what's going on right now? Do I have reason to be excited about it? Hoxpox had a wealth of things before the release that gave you the feeling that something was going to be new and brand new. And this one, the modality of thought seems to be much more rooted in returning to a sense of normalcy, which is a really interesting idea with X-Men specifically, because it's such a nostalgia-based property. And I think that what they're doing is approaching this line wide with some nostalgia lenses. But I think that nostalgia in general works better in microcosms than it does as a line-wide attempt. So I think like this X-Men 97 series, animated and a comic series, are a great way to be tapping into lapsed X fans or people who were X fans a long time ago, which is a huge market. But I do not think that the entire line should be tapping into that. Not that this specifically is. Like I think that you have to be offering something new and exciting to get people on board, which is why I think we saw a lot of people returning at Hoxpox, whereas the Rosenberg one before that didn't see that. So like there's not necessarily a great feeling coming from me as a retailer of like newness or exciting. It's more like returning to something that I have faith that I'll like. But it's also been quite a while since X-Men was a viable franchise for being that thing that is familiar. And so I spent a while sort of looking at, why do I think X-Men was successful originally? Why was it the most successful at its peak? And then what causes it or allows it to be successful now past its heyday? All of that is the stuff that goes into my mind when looking at a large relaunch like this.
And I think that that's a little bit different than the way some stores look at it, which
For
is
sure.
how can I sell this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that's kind of like those two perspectives are kind of the difference between earned and paid promotion.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So like we're looking at it from how is this earning our promotion and our purchase to sell to our customers versus how can we like market this and get it in front of people with their money. And I don't think either way is wrong in this circumstance, but it's two similar but very different
Yeah.
approaches.
And to, Brian's approach with it, like when Hoxpox started and it was 6 books all starting around the same time. Again, if we approach things from the modality of thought of how can I sell the most of these, there's a good opportunity for that. But I think that it puts a gap in your relationship with your customers when you are trying to load as much stuff on them to make money as you can versus having fewer things that you believe are high quality. So I applaud them for having 3 rather than 6, but then in the announcement there's also 6 icons of other properties that are going to be getting series.
As a pure customer at this point, because I don't own a shop, so I'm just going in and buying comics like a schlub, like every other schlub out there. You see that pile right there? That's my
Oh, yeah.
that's my current, like, books that I'm working on reading, and I have a short box next to me of another big chunk of books, and that's just a burden at this point,
Yeah.
right? Like I gotta get through that. And so inevitably there's a bunch of stuff that as soon as it comes out, I'm super excited to read, like Man's Best, Animal Pound, Transformers. Like those are ones that as soon as I get them, I'm going to read them probably by the time I get back to my car. But there's a whole host of other things. The first issue of Pine and Merrimack, I loved it. There's 2 more issues in that pile.
Yep.
I'm in the exact same boat
and
with
they're
you
great.
with that book.
It's so good.
And
But
Man's
there's this
Best
burning.
is so good.
it?
Jesse
Oh,
Lonergan and
we get it.
Pornsock Pichotse. I'm butchering your name. I apologize. An amazing comic book this week, as well as Dawn Runner by Rom V.
Yeah.
We had 2 really great non-Marvel DC #1s this week that blew my mind. That's our
At some
podcast.
point, we are also going to talk about Marvel's inconsistent trade policies because and their lack of like a premier format, because I have House of X and Powers of 10 there, but it would be so nice to have it on that top shelf where all my absolutes are.
You've just pointed out the, like, I would say, need for a Data Bros episode with Marvel's trade pricing, issue collection. I mean, Immortal Thor this last week caused kind of a stir in our store.
Wasn't there like an Immortal Thor trade recently
that was the one. It was 5 issues. It was $19.99, I believe, or $29.99. It was $29.99.
$36.95 Canadian. That's
Yeah.
For like 5 issues. So the idea of saving money in the trade is, not there. And in the interest of a tight 30, I'll stop talking. But you opened up a whole can of worms in my brain today, Brian, that I really appreciated.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. Listen, I think we're gonna wrap it up for this week and keep to that tight 30. And we probably went over a little bit, but I'll snip a couple of ums and ahs out, and we'll be fine.
Just take that whole part where Jeff and I really, really beefed it.
Oh yeah,
that
we'll
part
get
about
canceled if that gets out. So.
That was 15 to 16 minutes that we can just snip right out of the middle there.
Yeah, that was my bad.
Yeah.
We want to hear from you, dear listeners. So write to us at podcast@databrosinc.com. And let's take it away. You guys tell us a little bit about you and where we can find you.
Oh gosh. Well, you can find us at comicshopassistant.com. You can find me personally by searching my name, Django Boren. Sometimes I show up as Django himself. I don't know. I'm kind of erratic with the way that I choose my usernames on things.
Sometimes it's just pretty good TikTok videos, though.
Oh, pretty
On
good TikTok videos. At pretty good TikTok videos. That's on the platform is
TikToks.
Yeah.
TikToks.
Yeah.
And I'm Jeff.
And then you've got a comic shop too, don't you, Phyllis?
Oh yeah, we got a comic shop. We got a point of sale. We got it all. Hit him with the real, Jeff. Is that what they say?
Well, I'm Jeff. And after an anonymous person making a $300 deposit to my Venmo account saying thanks to the bros, I yesterday had to set up a Facebook account. So you can get me at Jeff-Figley on Venmo. Actually,
Dude,
nobody
why aren't
did
we
that.
friends on
Nobody did
Facebook
that.
yet? What's going on?
He's still
Django
learning
didn't
how to
teach me
ask.
how to get friends today. It's been a long time since I used Facebook. But yeah, you can get a hold of me at Jeffrey Figley on Facebook. I'm the picture with Django in it.
Oh, you look like something tastes bad in your mouth right now when you said that.
I just don't know how to talk about it. I feel like I've lost a fight.
You did. And I'm at Manage Comics on every platform. I'm on the Facebooks, the YouTubes, the X's or Twitters, or I don't even know what they're calling it these days. The Instagrams, I'm all over those things.
Ooh, I'm blame_Hoffman on X. You guys should find me there.
Nice. And we're gonna start doing some comic shop store reviews, because I've got a backlog of about 10 or 15. Because Django stole one of my best ideas ever and made it better. So now I have to evolve on it and make it even better again.
This is the best kind of war, Brian.
It raises all
war.
ships. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, y'all.
Absolutely. Thanks. And we'll see you next week.
The Data Bros is a joint project from the teams behind Comic Shop Assistant and Manage Comics. Data Bros are Django Boren, Jeff Figley, and Brian Garside. Brian Garside produces and edits the episode. And you'll find more about the Data Bros online at databrosinc.com. Subscribe, like, and review the Data Bros on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts.